Hi, and welcome back to another ET Talk. I'm Cole Camplese, Vice President for Technology and Chief Information Officer at the University of Texas at Austin. And today we're going to do something a little different. We've been talking to various players around the university who have, sort of deep operational roles, who really think about long-term planning and how the campus exists and how we manage the physical space. We had Brent here last time and it was just really great. And Julie Schell a couple of weeks ago talking about things in and around our classroom, but not actually an operator. And today I have somebody who I think is fits the definition of that perfectly. She runs what I call the front door to the university. And these kinds of programs and projects that we're going to talk about today are so difficult to execute, and especially at scale. And I think we're going to find out why. So joined by my good friend and colleague, Jennifer Love. Hey, Jennifer.
Hi, thanks for having me, Cole.
Oh, of course, of course. I love that you're here. I love that we both have these jobs where I think we wake up in the morning thinking about how to make the lives of students better.
Yeah,
right.
Well said.
And the idea of the student journey, the student experience, those terms get played out all over the place. We hear it all the time, and so few schools really take the time to hear the students and sometimes the frustrations of the faculty and the advisors who are helping to manage the students and really do something about that. Yeah. And, what you've built here is really exceptional. Can you just tell us a little bit about the One Stop?
Yeah, happy to. So I've been here at UT Austin for just about 8 years.
Yeah.
And I've had the privilege and truly the honor to be able to create the inaugural Texas One Stop. And what is all-inclusive in a One Stop can be a wide range of student services across the campus. But here at UT Austin, we include registration, financial aid, billing, and records. And the conceptual design around it is to center the student and all of the services around a student, instead of thinking that a student must learn that they need to go to the bursar's office.
Yep.
And they need to go to the financial aid office. And when they're going to both places, they're getting pieces of information.
Right.
But how do you actually thread those all together?
Yeah, and I think that's the crux of it, because I was introduced to this concept when I was at Northeastern.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the One Stop, but the idea of the shuffle. And we had this phrase, we called it the Northeastern Shuffle, that if you were a student, you would show up someplace and someone would say, oh, no, you have to go to the bursar first.
Yep.
And then the first thing they say is, what the hell's a bursar?
Yes.
Right? But you get them over there, they shuffle over there, and then they might get a piece of paper, they tell somebody their story, they say, oh, that's actually the registrar. And when you do it this way, it's almost like we chase the student instead of the student chasing us, right? We bring the elements together. Yeah. But I'm curious, I want to rewind a minute, because I took a look at your background a little bit, and as an undergrad, you were training to be a high school teacher.
Yep.
Right?
Yes. I went into education, wanted to be a social studies teacher, and so my daughter just graduated from 8th grade today.
Oh God! Congratulations!
And that was what I student taught, was 8th grade
No
social
kidding.
studies, and so we were reflecting back on just like how our year went, and that brings me back to being in the classroom and just what the importance of education is, but what I loved about it.
Yeah.
And it was really being able to leave a mark on students' lives as they continue to grow.
So how did you make that leap then, though? Because you went from undergrad and you went, you changed locations pretty dramatically, right? You went and got a master's degree in Delaware, right, from Wisconsin. How did you make that leap? So you're thinking social studies, but now I'm going to do this other thing. I want to think about more of a student focused kind of career.
Yeah, when I was reflecting on what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, I was really taking a moment to think, do I want to teach history or psychology or political science or economics year in and year out?
Right.
And what I started to realize when I was really involved on campus, so I was a resident assistant, I was an admissions tour guide, so I was really active and involved in my college community, and I really started to enjoy what a college atmosphere was giving me.
Yeah.
And I recognized that I could create this into a career, that there was a whole opportunity of being able to go on and get my master's and teach life skills to
Right.
students. It wasn't in the classroom, and so I was really kind of thinking, what can I teach folks outside of the classroom? But when I was closing my eyes, I'm like, I want to teach students my age, and as we continue to grow, my age, on how to be adults.
Yeah, and I think that that's a role of a university that sometimes gets lost.
Yeah.
And you know, John Dalton and I he joined the podcast, and we
Yeah.
talked a lot about co-curricular life learning and how those two things have to come together.
Yeah.
And I find that the folks that operate in worlds like yours and student affairs really have this passion for helping to develop the whole student.
Yeah.
And sometimes the struggles are part of what that looks like.
Sometimes they are.
So how do you think about that? You know, we're bringing service right to the students in a way that, you know, I never had in college. My
Oh,
God, it was
goodness.
brutal.
Right.
You know, scheduling classes, paying bills. There were 44 different offices that you had to go and visit, and you had no idea what you were doing.
Yeah, I really think fundamentally believe that a student shouldn't have to understand hidden curriculums or things that are just not clearly out there for everyone to have access to be able to get to graduation
Yeah.
or to be successful in this adult. And so I think our primary goal is always to be really clear and to make things more simple
Yeah.
for students to be able to navigate. And it doesn't negate the learning opportunities that we have through our mistakes or through some of the challenging times. But like, I always think back to the start of the semester, and I'm teaching students how to actually sign scholarship checks and or write out physical checks to be able
Writing
to
a
pay their
physical-
tuition
yes,
bill. Because
yes.
there's very few opportunities nowadays to do those,
Yeah.
but it still is a life skill that you need to actually have when you go out and be an adult in the world when you're paying rent, for example.
Well, and it's funny because, you know, my son's just finished his first year here,
Yeah.
and you know, he'll get mad, but he doesn't watch this, so it doesn't make any difference. But he has no idea how to really answer the telephone.
Yeah.
And, you know, writing a check is a very foreign thing. Signing his name is
Yeah.
because these are just not the durable skills that, you know, I remember getting taught how to answer the telephone in school,
Yeah.
right? You say hello to Camplese residents, and you do that thing.
Sure.
He just waits for me to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an interesting twist to what you're talking about, that we have these kids getting into one of the premier universities in the country, the
Yeah.
tops of their classes from all over the place, and then they don't know how to write a check.
Yeah.
They don't know how to answer the telephone. And they need that by the time they get out of here, because that makes them career ready as well.
Career ready. We're here to support and not make students feel silly or ashamed that they're unable to do those
Right.
type of things. I think it's being able to have a really supportive environment when maybe those are some of the skills you just never learned from your family or from inside the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, those used to be, it's like reading, writing, arithmetic. Now we're adding AI.
Yeah.
But we've lost a little bit of like handwriting and penmanship and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's sort of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were in Minnesota,
Yeah.
you worked in a shared services organization, right? You
Yes.
sort of apprenticed there.
Yeah.
And then you went on to Columbia,
Yeah.
where you really helped build something. And then you got recruited to come here.
Mm-hmm.
Was it purposefully to build the one stop? Was that the ad you sort of answered in the Chronicle or wherever you found the position?
Yeah, when I think back to my experiences, especially in Minnesota and at Columbia, I was a one-stop counselor. So I was a frontline person answering student questions, and I loved the feeling of being able to help directly, whether it be parents or students, and to actually help people solve their problems.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about the University of Minnesota is that it was one of the very first one-stops that was ever created. And
That's what I thought.
longest-standing.
Yeah. And it's not easy to build. So
No.
what did you learn through working at this formative place,
Yeah.
Minnesota, and then going to Columbia,
Yeah.
that allowed you to accelerate the journey for UT? Because I want to ask you some little bit tougher questions about like how you go about doing this. But
Yeah.
like what were the big lessons that you pulled from that you brought to UT?
I think one of the reasons why I was ready for the challenge here at UT is that Minnesota was one completely different style of a one-stop experience from what was at Columbia University.
Interesting.
And what I was able to bring here was the understanding that one size doesn't fit all with approaches and models, but it is important to take a look at what everyone else is doing across the country just so that you're assessing best practices. And so, at the University of Minnesota, it was a very large team. Everything was very consolidated, but it was also extremely centralized. Everything was, whether it was advising or the registrar's offices, financial aid, everything was centralized. But then when I moved to Columbia, it was the complete opposite.
Complete opposite. Yeah.
Everything was decentralized. Everything had to go through different channels for decision making, etc. And so what I was able to bring here is a blend of those two.
Right.
Being a public institution, but also a very decentralized environment. We were able to actually approach the challenge that we had with all of those things in mind.
So when you get this mandate, you have colleagues who are doing these jobs now, because we talked about it. You had to go to the bursar. Like, what does that conversation look like on day one when you walk in the room and the provost or the president draws the line in the sand and says, look, we're not taking your work away, but we're moving some of that work to better serve the students. Like, I end up in a lot of those kinds of rooms, and it sounds like a lot of compromise.
It's compromise with a capital C.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough when I was recruited to come here that there was already a year's worth of groundwork.
Okay.
And being able to create the necessary change environment to be able to make this successful.
Okay.
And so a part of that was actually defining who's on the implementation team, who are the governance and the decision makers for when we actually need to decide what's happening or who's doing what. And having that structure in place gave me some ground to be able to start from, but a lot of it is just relationships.
I think this whole place, well, most higher eds, we've both been at other places. It really does revolve around taking the time to understand not just your colleagues' work, but their challenges.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, what are some of the challenges that you face in the one stop that you wish maybe, like my team, understood better to support you better?
I like to think of the most challenging time for students and for the one-stop team is the beginning of the semester in August.
Yep.
And there's usually, I describe it in kind of three parts. The reason that it's so busy and it's hard to reach someone here at UT Austin versus at other schools that I've worked at is because we have compression of timelines.
Yep.
And so you have a bill that typically is issued and then it's due in a 2.5 week turnaround.
Yeah.
With 55,000 students all contacting us at the same exact time for questions that are meaningful to be answered during that time. That's really a struggle.
That's fat. So my daughter went to Northeastern University in Boston. And you're right. Like, now that you say it, I noticed that all of our payment cycles, like when I have to pay Max's stuff, it's very tight.
Yeah, it's compressed.
Where Maddie had like months to pay bills, and I think it spread the support out across that campus. So when you say that, then what should we be thinking about? Like, because I know you've done Salesforce, you've done all these tools and products to try to manage the 55,000 emails and calls that come in literally in the same 2 week block.
Yeah, then that really goes to what can someone self-service or not.
Yep.
And I think we live in a very bifurcated systems environment. And when the staff, but not only the students, are having to go here and there to be able to actually synthesize all of the information that they need to know to start the semester, that's usually where I think the barrier and the shutdown happens of like, I just need help.
Yeah.
And so our primary goal is to be there when students need help, but what can we help them self-service on so that they don't have to actually call and talk to someone? Where if you're just wondering how much do I need to pay for my bill for the semester, that it's pretty easy and you can just see that and do it all in one shot.
And I'm guessing you get flooded with what we call tier 1 kinds of stuff
Yeah.
at the beginning of the semester, just the real basics. And some of it must be, how do I just go and find my bill?
Yeah.
I mean, that took me about a semester and a half to figure it out here
Yeah.
for my son. He kept sending me, I have tuition due. And I kept saying, I keep going to my UT and it's not there.
Yes.
He's like, no, you have to go to what you owe. And I was like, oh, that makes sense.
And my tuition bill.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah, we have a lot of tier one type of questions. And so that's, I think, our next stage. And since we've implemented the One Stop and we've stood it up, we've actually have moved almost every single kind of like software system that we use to manage the office modes of traffic. So our phone system, our queuing system for in-person services, and then our CRM. We've moved already from what we implemented, 7 years ago to something else.
Wow. So you're iterating toward excellence all
Yes.
the time. And how do you track? You keep data, I'm sure, on call volume and closure and time to close and all of those things. And that's proven meaningful in these kinds of decisions that you've had to make?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we've had to make changes because of costs, and something is more cost efficient than the other.
Yep.
And sometimes we've been able to use the data to actually say this is where we actually need a system to help us understand X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And now we've moved with our CRM system from ServiceNow to Salesforce. And we've been really able to kind of like open up the Pandora's box of what's possible. And we've been able to see the possibilities of how we can maybe leverage agentic AI in the future. And how can we have a need where we currently do not have staff support.
Right.
Where agentic AI can fill in that gap.
Without a doubt. We're seeing that everywhere on campus. But I also remember reading that you made another decision where you switched from students as your frontline employees to FTE.
Yeah.
That's a bold financial move.
Yes.
Because, like I run a service desk and I staff it certainly with some grown-ups,
Yeah.
but, a lot of students.
Yeah.
What was the genesis of that? What were you seeing in the One Stop?
I believe our student workers are the smartest and our students are the smartest and most intelligent,
Yep.
but our student workers are amazing.
Yep.
The challenge is that financial aid, all of our different policies, but especially in the financial aid space, everything is changing so rapidly that for someone who's only working 10 to 15 hours a
Right.
week, for them to be an expert in financial aid.
And it changes every year we deal with all new, people don't realize how difficult it is just to keep up with the federal policies,
Yeah.
let alone state changes.
Yeah.
And so I can see how somebody who comes to work 40 hours a week and
Yeah.
lives in these systems gets to do that.
Yeah,
It
really is cracking open the problem-solving capabilities, and so we have student staff who help us physically, like in person, helping us answer questions or print transcripts or different things like that. Especially the registrar's office leverages student staff too.
Yep.
And it's something that we continue to look at as we change and move our models forward and progress forward. But it was an intentional decision because we knew that folks were not happy with the level of service that they were currently receiving before we made this change to the one-stop model.
So we've talked about two sides of the triangle, the people and the technology,
Yeah.
right? And you've made big changes in both of those.
Yeah.
So in the process space, what do you think about year over year as you watch this thing grow, change, shift, adapt?
Yeah, I think that's been a part of my role change over the last 2 years in overseeing financial aid, is to actually really help the workflows and the processes become more efficient. By having the frontline experience that I've had, to then be able to bring that into understanding then the background pieces of how students' financial aid appeal is reviewed and how the timeliness actually impacts their decisions on whether or not they're going to summer school or not is really important.
Yeah.
And so being able to actually give light and words to that to a team that I think has always felt like, well, but we've always worked with the frontline students, but now we're not working with students. How are we still supporting them?
Right.
And they're 100% still supporting them.
Yeah.
Just in a different capacity, but almost more like it is not just one or the other. One is not more important than the other when
Right.
it comes to supporting the background and like service or processes or workflows versus being a frontline. They're symbiotic.
They are. And one of the great lessons I learned at UChicago, we took a team of our service desk to the Michigan Avenue Apple Store.
Okay.
And we were allowed to come in like 2 hours early before they opened. And
Yeah.
they showed us the front and back room operations and how they operate so seamlessly. So when you go to an Apple store and you want to buy something,
Sure.
the person stays and talks with you. They ask you, they're upselling you or they're asking you questions about how to,
Sure.
do you have a trade-in? All the while, somebody back in the back is using these custom tools that they've built to deliver that device and make
Yeah.
it feel like a real experience. So you're absolutely right, but they have to live in partnership,
They do.
the front and back office. And I think that that's a place where my team is getting stronger, but we're
Yeah.
not really there yet because IT historically has been a bit of a back office function.
Yeah.
And just like you've built this thing where it brings it into the light, that's sort of the way we see technology advancing with
Yeah.
the rise of AI, especially
Yeah.
my team being able to meet your team where you work. And the fact that you focus on people, process, and technology gives us an incredible foundation to do some of the automation that I think is going to be necessary to continue to serve students at the volume that you do.
I couldn't agree more.
So the One Stop opened in 2020.
In 2020,
So-
we were a week and a half away.
I was just going to ask this. Yeah.
From opening the front doors of the physical space. So what some people, but not everyone knows, is that we actually moved the staff that we had hired for the One Stop to the financial aid office
Okay.
over in SSB. And so we were training all during this time kind of like underneath this guise that we're the financial aid office. So we were building it all up. But then 2020, March, right after spring break, we were supposed to open up the front
Oh
doors.
my
And then
God.
COVID hit.
So you opened the front doors to the tech stop, and the doors to the tower are closed.
Yeah, actually, it took 6 months for us to actually complete the last bits of construction
Oh my God.
because that's how that 1.5 week span of construction work
Just shut everything down.
everything down and spanned it all out until September of 2020 when we had just a few people in the office who were there physically, all ready with PPE, everything
Glass
COVID.
up. Yeah, everything full
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah.
What did you learn during that? Because when I went through that, I was still at Northeastern, and we did such transformational work during that time.
Yeah.
Everything was a green light. I'm curious, what did you learn in that window of time? So you were supposed to open, you did open,
Yeah.
but you opened without the physical presence, which is really sort of one of the big points of having the One Stop.
That was a huge point of it. But one thing it was looking in the past and one for the future was we were able to so quickly respond. So while our physical doors were shut, we actually were taking phone calls and answering emails the day after spring break because we were focused on upgrading all of our technology,
Yeah.
like the actual hardware. So everyone had a laptop because remember in 2019, not everyone had a laptop.
No, that
at
was
that
a
point.
huge problem for us at Northeastern. We had to
Yeah.
procure thousands of laptops.
Yeah, so we were already focused on that because there's a part of the job for our staff where they're moving from the front desk to a back office, and so part of it is just being able to bring their work wherever they
Right.
were going to do their work. And the fact that we were responding to that ahead of like a crisis is what made us able to not drop the ball on our students.
Wow.
And we were there answering calls because no one knew what was happening. And One Stop was there to say, hey, it's okay. We don't know either, but we'll figure this out together.
So when you guys flip that switch and you're coming back from spring break, but the students aren't, things are closing down, had the phone trees already been set up, and
Phone trees were
so
all
basically
set
you
up.
were ready, and you became the call center.
We
for
became like the
the
central
center.
university hub
So you went from 0 to like 100 overnight.
very quickly.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
That's that's reminiscent of the time. I think anytime I talk to anybody, the resourcefulness that everybody showed, and I feel like in many ways we saw the best of our teams
Yeah, I agree.
during that time, and the support that we all got. How did that play out? So you have this brand new thing that's supposed to be celebrated. It doesn't open the way it's supposed to, and then the world just sort of moves on at the university, right?
Yeah.
Because we're into how do we do a safe return and all the things that go along with it.
Yeah.
Did you ever get that big ribbon cutting ceremony?
Oh, we made sure we
Did
did.
ya?
We
Good.
did. I have a photo in my office of us doing the ribbon cutting. We just had to wait a year.
Yeah.
And so we just had to be more patient and wait until it was the right time and appropriate for us to be able to celebrate
Yeah.
that. And so we waited a year, and it was really great.
That's cool.
But I couldn't agree more with you on that idea of, when I think back to COVID, how transformational, because we did do the things
All of them.
that we had been asking for.
All of us were begging to like unleash us to do these things, and
Yep.
it was always, well, the governance committee or the security officer or the council or the blah or the provost didn't
Yeah.
want to, but then it was just okay. Forget about all of that,
Yeah.
and we're not going to ask you to work 60 or 70 hours a week, but you're probably going to, but you're going to get to do some of the best work of your career.
One of the things that I think really changed the game for our students, and it sounds so small, but it actually is transformational, was the academic summary. Believe it or not, before COVID, you would have to come in physically in person to get your academic summary,
Really?
which is like your unofficial
Yeah.
transcript. But COVID allowed us those freedoms to say,
Right.
let's just do this
Let's just do
because
it.
this is easier for the student to access virtually, and to be able to team up with, folks in
Yeah.
AIS or ET at
And
that
Graham
point.
and
Yeah, to be able to actually make something like that happen. I mean, that was pretty wonderful, and that was all led by the registrar's office. To make
Was it
that
really?
happen. And so it's really cool.
yeah, and I don't know about here, but there we had these committees. We met every morning at 7 a.m., which really sucked because I was in Chicago and they're in Boston. And so
Yeah.
I was at the 6 a.m. meeting, not the 7 a.m.
Yeah.
meeting. But it was the registrar, it was the provost, all the VPs.
Yeah.
And every day we would get sort of marching orders and we would go execute all day, all the different units. And then we'd come back the next morning and get another set of marching orders. Like we
Yeah.
were literally turning technologies on and over in days instead of the months and years that it takes us now.
Yeah. When I look back on it, I'm pretty proud of what
Yeah.
folks did during that time.
I am too. It was always like the best of times and worst of times
Oh,
kind of
yes.
thing.
That's true.
But so your doctoral work, like you did some interesting work in stranded credits.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, because I read that and I have a pretty good idea what that is.
Sure.
And I think it relates to something my son has talked to me about. So I'm curious.
Yeah. So my work was understanding institutional debt and how students make sense of either institutional debt or holds, and how that relates to stranded credits. Stranded credits typically means that a student does some college, but they don't graduate. And so they're leaving behind credits at the institution. And we all know what's most valuable is getting that diploma.
That's right.
Like, the journey is really important, but the end is where the actual value is in being able to move on further with your career. So being in the positions that I've been throughout my entire career, I'm graduated from the EDD program here, and the EDD work that I was able to do was far more practitioner based
Yep.
versus theoretical. And I was able to use sense-making theory to understand how students make sense of when they're communicated about a hold, and why do they financially leave and are financially dismissed when we need to be pulling them back in.
Right.
And so I really wanted to evaluate policies around that and understand the communication structures. It was really great.
It's really great, and it's it's practice to research, right? And, we always talk about research to practice, but
Yeah.
you were sitting in this environment, breathing this in and recognizing this institutional challenge, and your graduate work gave you the opportunity to sort of focus in on really a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And I think our retention rates are pretty strong,
Our retention rates are amazing.
but there are a lot of schools where that is a number one challenge: 4-year graduation rate, retention rates. We have a little bit of a different situation here.
Yeah.
What do you think are those, or the big risk to students at UT? Is it the overwhelming size and scope of the place? Is it understanding where they have to go? What have you seen in your time here that you say, if we could do one thing to overcome that next rung on the ladder to help our students, what do you think that looks like?
I think it's not feeling lost or like that you could easily just fall back.
Yeah.
So I think it does answer to or allude to the size of the school. And I think sometimes students feel like they can easily just step back and no one will ever notice.
Yeah.
But we're here to say, no, we do notice. And I think that there's been extraordinary work that's been done to reach our retention rates and our graduation rates to where they are right now.
Yeah.
And there's still students who are coming to us, even though the numbers aren't as great. When you hear the student stories of, I'm having, this physical challenge, or like I'm going through this medical issue, or my parents are going through this right now, because in the time span of 4 years, a lot of life can happen.
Yeah, and a lot of impact to families.
Yep.
Because the cost of education, the stress of, becoming almost empty nesters again,
Yep.
can change a lot of the family dynamic.
Yeah, and being able to when I'm still hearing those stories in my position at One Stop, I know that there's still work that we need to do.
Right.
And so I think whether it's at, here or somewhere else where retention rates maybe need a little bit of support, my hope was that the research would be able to help better understand what a student's going through.
Yeah.
And so it was qualitative. And the point of that is to be able to actually just tell the stories
Right.
and be able to synthesize that so
Yeah.
that we can bring it into our practices.
All right, so we're fast forwarding. It's September.
Yeah,
The kids are back.
yeah.
She's freaking out. She's coming to see you. She's stressed. She has no idea. What do you want her to leave that building feeling like after coming in and talking to your team?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that the student feels cared for.
Yeah.
And I know that can feel different ways for different people. But if it's that I know who you are, that I know what you're struggling with, and that I'm here to help you.
And there's somebody here to help you. And I think that that's something that we all need to be thinking about, no matter where you are in this student journey.
Yeah.
Giving those students the courage and confidence to take advantage of this amazing place.
Yeah.
And-
To ask questions.
Yeah, be curious. Yeah. I have to tell you, Jennifer, I've absolutely loved this conversation.
Thank you. Me too.
I can't thank you enough for coming and spending some time with us today as you're doing just absolutely incredible work. So thank the team
I will.
for
Thank
us.
you.
We appreciate it so much. And I have a personal stake in this. My kid comes to the One
Yes,
Stop.
yeah.
You guys have actually helped us with a couple of things at
Yeah.
the start of his academic career. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, everyone, that's another episode of ET Talk. It was great to have Jennifer here today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.